This is not a practice that like has never existed, and you can also see it all the time in the Bible, but for some reason, I know what the reason is. Particularly in evangelical churches, that's kind of been taught to just be ignored, which obviously isn't fair. People have questions, people deserve to be included, people deserve to have those answers. We should be having those discussions because they're important, and to not have them because it might shake that notion that you need to have an answer to everything, you know, it's kind of dumb. I've practiced this story in like out loud 2 to 3 times, so hopefully I'm gonna do this right. So funnily enough, I have had like 3 instances of people who have come to me, or I've known that they were questioning their doubt. 2 happened like when I was around, I would say 16 to 18 years old, by the same person the first 2 times. Issues with that, I wasn't going through it. I was still very much devout and very much religious. And I was never like the hater religious person, I guess, who like doesn't like people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, who puts down women, who like, you know, I was never that person. I was very much too over eager.
I love you because I'm Christian. I love you.
Like, I will say that. But outside of that, I was pretty much a normal person, I guess. As normal as one can be anyways. I wasn't in the headspace to do it. It felt like it was an unnecessary attack, and that person wasn't around often enough, in my opinion, at that time, have an opinion about religion and the church. The responses and the things that they got about my church at the time were from people who were already in drama and were having issues. So of course, there would be this weird warped view of religion and the church. The 3rd time, we're doing a lot of decision making for certain things, and this person was brought up as essentially having questioned their faith like for a really long time. And I was angry because the timing of it I felt was very suspicious. The person who had told all of us about it, I felt was doing it to be pretty spiteful. So it just kind of hurt and angered me as well that this person was going through it, and we did absolutely nothing to make them feel better, to comfort them. I just felt like that person wasn't being cared for in the way that they should have been cared for. Trying to be as vague as possible because, again, these are not my stories, and I just want to be respectful of that. I've definitely talked to those people, and I've like apologized because obviously now I understood. I was in grad school and I was doing my internship at a food pantry, and I was obviously in my classes, and we keep bringing up like we're talking about social justice and we're talking about power structures, and I'm going to a food pantry where I see people who cannot afford to live off of SNAP and have to come into the food pantry to get their food, even down to people who are homeless and are coming in to get something to last them for 2 weeks or so, or their families for 2 weeks or so. And it was just frustrating. You know, like, I've always known that Christians have sucked in terms of just like oppression wise, but like having that to also constantly be a narrative when it hasn't been such a constant narrative before in my like previous kind of teachings in my previous years in school. And then I also used to be around people who were not incredibly inclusive, and that got to me. I was like, how can God represent all of these people who can be oppressors yet also be representative of the marginalized? Like, how can God love both? How can God allow so much suffering? And just why are things the way that they are? I just went through a lot of just soul searching and crying and panicking and anxiety, and some of those things still exist today. I've been able to kind of find things to help me, and for me, what's given me a lot more comfort and peace is hearing the Bible in a historical context in a way that like I just have never been taught, and that's what makes it so much more easier for me. My knees have literally been hurting all day. I realized and forgot that I walked all around Target in slippers yesterday. These slippers, obviously they have no like support or grip, so you're walking across a Target, which is usually pretty big. I didn't think, but it's fine. So from that personal journey, I obviously read a lot of books. I'm going to talk about some of the books that I know of that I feel like might be helpful. So for me, what first helped me in my journey was Inspired by the late Rachel Held Evans. I love reading her books. I listened to Inspired as an audiobook twice, and then I bought it as an actual book. But the way that she explains things is simple and really raw, and she's able to make things way more beautiful and combine and have so much better meaning. And she's also just really inclusive as well when she speaks, but she has definitely left a mark on this world, and I'm really grateful that I got to find her stuff and at least know her for a year. Not know her, but like follow her on Twitter. That's kind of what I mean. The next book I read was The Sin of Certainty by Peter Enns. It says Peter Enns, like if you search on Amazon or something, but he also kind of goes by Pete. Like every single time he's been mentioned in something, it's always Pete Enns. So whatever you want, which was recommended to me by that same friend that I felt wasn't getting enough love way before I entered the realm of deconstruction, and I just didn't read it. The book can be a bit wordy and a bit academic, particularly since I didn't really understand what certainty meant until I read the book. The only certainty I thought of was like biology, where you have to have certainty. I also literally forgot what that means, but I just thought it was a science term. So he kind of gets to the main point, or just like the raw point, like out of nowhere, which is what I appreciate, because it makes you have to actually stop and take in what was just said and go back and make sure you didn't miss anything. So that's what I really love. The next book is Searching for Sunday by Rachel Held Evans again, and this book just talks about when she first started to go through religious deconstruction and how that caused her to have to kind of leave church and try to find a new church again. And she also talks about just like the emotional just kind of toll it was to go through questioning. And there's a part where she talks about kind of sometimes waking up in the middle of the night and crying and panicking, which I think is normal to most people who go through deconstruction because it is so difficult. Of course, I also recommend your religious texts. I always think it's important to read your religious texts for yourself. It's great to have these books to help you kind of be a little bit more clear. And I feel like after you read maybe one or two books, you can go back to the Bible and read it in a new light. Not the Bible, but your religious text, and read it in a new light. I do have some other books that I'm still reading. The one that I'm actually reading, because I just finished Searching for Sunday, and apparently I put a good chunk of my books in storage, which I didn't know I did. The first is Womanist Midrash by Will Gaffney. Midrash is essentially a Jewish practice. It's a bit of a wordy book, but she does talk about women in the Bible in a more modern and womanist concept. It is also really great because it is inclusive of queer and trans folks, obviously inclusive of women of color, but particularly Black women. But some other books that I have on hand but still have to read that I thought were interesting: Daughters of Miriam, Women Prophets in Ancient Israel by Will Gaffney, Faith Unraveled by Rachel Held Evans, A Year of Biblical Womanhood by Rachel Held Evans, Our Lives Matter, A Womanist Queer Theology by Pamela R. Lightsey, and Sisters in the Wilderness, The Challenge of Womanist God Talk by Dolores S. Williams. These research videos are not just supposed to be surrounding political stuff. They're just supposed to be surrounding social issues or topics that I think are interesting and I feel like haven't been explained very well. This one was a bit more wordy than I would have liked it to be. Since I found out that it was more of a philosophical thing, I expect nothing less. So I'm very sorry. And usually when you talk about religion and theology, it always is unnecessarily That motor sounds rough.
Where is he going? Is he circling the block?
As always, I left my sources down below. There is one that literally just bashes deconstruction people. Like, it's really bad, and I didn't realize it until after I was kind of cleaning up all of my research. So you can read that if you want, and I've noted which one it is. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next week, where we talk about something that's a little bit more less philosophical, I hope. Please. Please be good to me, research. Thank you. Goodbye.